Most people remember the red paint, the tractors, and maybe the Scout. But International Harvester was never just a farm company. It was a force, one that grew so large it helped feed the world and nearly collapsed under its own weight. From the fields of Illinois to the front lines of war, from diesel engines to courtroom battles, this is the rise, reign, and reinvention of a forgotten empire. This is the entire history of International Harvester. Chapter 1. The Rivals Who Built a Revolution. Long before the name International Harvester ever appeared on a machine, two very different men were laying its foundation, without knowing it, and certainly without agreeing to it. In the early decades of the 19th century, as American agriculture began shifting from hand tools to horsepower, a quiet revolution was already underway. It started not with corporations or boardrooms, but with two families and two visions, one rooted in invention, the other in enterprise. Cyrus Hall McCormick was born in the foothills of Virginia on February 15, 1809, into a world still shaped by sweat and sickles. His family farm was productive, but like most of the South at the time, it relied heavily on physical labor and seasonal luck. His father, Robert McCormick, was more than a farmer. He was a tinkerer, endlessly refining a mechanical reaper he hoped could replace the backbreaking work of cutting grain by hand. But Robert's ambitions never quite made it to market. It was Cyrus who picked up where his father left off. At just 22 years old, in the year 1831, Cyrus McCormick successfully built and demonstrated a working mechanical reaper. It was simple by today's standards, rough blades, basic gearing, but it could do in minutes what took men hours. For the first time, farmers saw a path away from manual harvest. The reaper wasn't met with instant applause. Many farmers were skeptical. Some refused to believe a machine could match the precision of human hands. But McCormick was relentless. He traveled, demonstrated, explained, and listened. And when he saw the limits of selling machines from rural Virginia, he made a bold decision. In 1847, he moved west to Chicago. The city was fast becoming the industrial heart of the Midwest, and McCormick saw opportunity in its railroads, rivers, and access to the Great Plains. There, he built a factory to scale production. But McCormick didn't just build machines. He built a system. He offered financing to farmers, trained sales agents, and laid out one of the first rural distribution networks in American industry. His name became synonymous with the reaper itself, and by the 1850s, he was a national figure. But while McCormick was focused on gears and gears alone, another name was rising in the North, quietly, steadily, and with a different kind of genius. William Deering was born on April 25, 1826, in South Paris, Maine. Unlike McCormick, he didn't grow up on a farm. He was raised around business. His family operated a small woolen mill, and from a young age, William learned the mechanics of commerce, how to balance books, manage supplies, and negotiate with customers. By the time he reached adulthood, Deering had moved beyond textiles and into investment. He didn't build machines, but he understood the machinery of distribution, and he saw agriculture as an industry in desperate need of smarter logistics. In the late 1860s and early 70s, Deering entered the harvester business, not by invention, but acquisition. He took over a small harvesting operation and transformed it into the Deering Harvester Company. Where McCormick had dominated the field with aggressive manufacturing, Deering focused on reach and reliability. His equipment wasn't always the most innovative, but it was dependable, consistent, and supported by strong dealer networks. He cultivated relationships with farmers, listened to their needs, and refined his machines accordingly. By the late 1870s, Deering had become McCormick's most dangerous rival. What followed was a rivalry that defined American agriculture for nearly 3 decades. The two men rarely met in person, but their companies collided constantly in advertising wars, price battles, patent disputes, and sales territory skirmishes. One focused on mechanical superiority. The other built trust through service and accessibility, but both understood the same truth. The farmer wasn't just a customer, he was the future. As the century turned, their fight began to wear thin, not just on each other, but on the entire industry. Farmers were caught between brands, factories were burning through capital, and lawsuits piled up. That's when another force entered the scene, one that neither McCormick nor Deering could ignore: Wall Street, specifically J.P. Morgan. Morgan didn't care for pride or legacy. He saw numbers, duplication, and inefficiency. And in McCormick and Deering, he saw two giants bleeding each other dry. What he proposed would shock the agricultural world and change both men's legacies forever. But before that chapter could begin, their individual paths had to reach a breaking point, and by the dawn of the 20th century, they did. McCormick had built an empire of machines. Deering had built a fortress of distribution. They had battled across plains, courtrooms, and columns of the press, but neither could see what was coming next. A merger that would erase their rivalry, consolidate their power, and give birth to a name no farmer would ever forget. International Harvester was waiting. Chapter 2. J.P. Morgan's Merger Machine. But for all the battles McCormick and Deering fought, neither could outrun the pressures closing in by the turn of the 20th century. Their competition had grown so fierce, so all-consuming that it began eating away at the very market both men depended on. Machinery was improving, but profits were shrinking. Sales teams were growing, but territories were overlapping. Farmers were confused, factories were overbuilt, and while both companies were still powerful, it was clear to anyone watching closely they were burning fuel faster than they could refill it. That's when the railroad financier from New York arrived. J. Pierpont Morgan wasn't interested in tractors or reapers. He didn't care about field conditions, iron castings, or even the legacy of agriculture. What he saw was waste. Waste in production, waste in competition, waste in opportunity. Morgan had built an empire by consolidating industries that fought themselves into exhaustion. And in the agricultural equipment market, he saw a perfect example of that pattern. Dozens of companies pushing similar machines, crowding the same markets, driving prices down without driving quality up. From a financial perspective, it was chaos disguised as capitalism. In the year 1902, Morgan approached the two titans, Cyrus McCormick Jr. and Charles Deering, with a proposal that would have seemed unthinkable a decade earlier. End the war, merge the giants, consolidate the market, and create one unified industrial power capable of controlling the future of American agriculture. What emerged from that conversation wasn't just a truce, it was a new empire. The International Harvester Company was formed in August of that year, combining 5 firms into a single force: the McCormick Harvesting Machine Company, the Deering Harvester Company, and 3 smaller manufacturers whose names quickly faded from memory. What didn't fade was the impact. Almost overnight, International Harvester controlled approximately 85% of the grain harvesting equipment market in the United States. It was an industrial monopoly in everything but name. Ownership was carefully structured. The McCormick family walked away with roughly 42.6% of the new company. The Deering interests claimed 34.4%. The rest, held by Morgan and the remaining partners, provided just enough balance to keep everyone at the table, even if not entirely on equal terms. From that moment forward, the rivalry that had defined agricultural manufacturing was no longer between companies. It was within one company, and Morgan now held the keys. The timing could not have been more perfect. Just as Henry Ford was quietly building the first Model F tractor, International Harvester was emerging as the agricultural equivalent of a Goliath, bigger, richer, and more organized than anything that had come before it. The scale was staggering. IH factories stretched across the Midwest. Warehouses filled with castings, gear housings, and steel frames lined train yards in every direction. And with a near monopoly on the core harvesting market, the company had the capital to experiment, expand, and absorb smaller threats before they could grow. But dominance always attracts attention, and in this case, it brought the full weight of the federal government. Just a dozen years earlier, Congress had passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, a sweeping piece of legislation designed to prevent the formation of monopolies and protect competition. At the time, the act was seen as a warning shot against the likes of Standard Oil and U.S. Steel. But now, eyes were turning toward agriculture. Critics argued that International Harvester, with its overwhelming market share and Morgan's financial muscle, was a textbook case of the very monopoly the law was meant to prevent. The legal challenges came quickly. Lawsuits were filed, public hearings were held. Farmers who once praised McCormick and Deering now questioned whether the merger had robbed them of choice. Government lawyers dug deep into contracts, pricing policies, and internal memos, looking for proof that IH had conspired to strangle the market. And while International Harvester survived the scrutiny, barely, the damage was done. The company's public image took a hit. Its founders spent years in court, defending decisions made not out of greed, but out of exhaustion. The merger had saved their companies, but it also drew a line in the sand. From this point forward, International Harvester wasn't just a manufacturer. It was a target, a symbol, and for many, the face of industrial overreach. Yet, even under pressure, it didn't back down. If anything, it grew bolder, because now, with its rivals absorbed and its reach extended, IH had the power to shape agriculture, not just in one state or one season, but for generations, and it had no intention of slowing down. Chapter 3: Farmals, Trucks, and Power. With lawsuits behind it and capital in hand, International Harvester didn't waste time defending its reputation. Instead, it did what only giants could. It built. The 1920s marked the start of a golden era, not just for ICH, but for the mechanization of American life. At a time when most farms still relied on horses, when cities were growing but infrastructure lagged behind, International Harvester surged ahead, determined to be the engine behind both agriculture and industry. And it did so with machines that didn't just perform, they defined what performance meant. By 1917, just 15 years after the merger, International Harvester was already the fourth largest industrial company in the United States. In terms of total assets, it ranked higher than Ford, higher than General Electric, and even higher than General Motors. Its factories were churning out machines that reached every corner of American life, from wheat fields in Kansas to construction sites in Chicago. But it was in the year 1924 that IH changed farming forever. That was the year the first Farmal was introduced. Not a specialist tool, not a one-season tractor. The Farmal was built to do it all: plow, plant, cultivate, harvest. It combined high ground clearance with nimble steering and powerful torque, all wrapped into a machine that a single operator could manage without a team of laborers. It was more than a tractor, it was a strategy, a way to put control back in the hands of small farmers while accelerating output. Its gasoline engine offered just enough power to pull implements across row crops without wasting fuel. And for many farms, it became the first motorized equipment ever purchased. The success of the original Farmal gave birth to an entire lineup. By the early 1930s, the F-Series had taken over American fields. The F-20 and F-30 models added more muscle, more durability, and wider compatibility with evolving implements. These machines weren't just powerful, they were built for scale. Production lines were standardized, parts were interchangeable, and their engines, ranging from roughly 4,000 cubic centimeters, or about 244 cubic inches, and higher, were simple enough for any farmer to maintain with basic tools. But IH wasn't content with just plowing soil. It saw an opportunity in the growing demand for transport, and it stepped in aggressively. In the early 1920s, International Harvester launched its S-Series trucks, medium-duty haulers that gave small businesses a way to move goods faster, cheaper, and more reliably. By 1925, the company introduced the Model 63 street washing truck, built not for crops but for cities, helping municipalities clean roads with mechanized efficiency. Around the same time, the A-Series heavies made their debut, rugged, load-bearing machines that catered to construction and industrial clients who needed more than horsepower. They needed uptime. By the close of the decade, the numbers were impossible to ignore. International Harvester was now producing more farm equipment than all of its competitors combined. And by the late 1930s, it held control of 44% of the entire U.S. tractor market. Its dominance wasn't based on hype. It was built on machines that worked, engines that lasted, and a company that never let go of its momentum. In every field, on every road, and across every barn door, there was a growing truth in American life. If it moved, plowed, hauled, or swept, chances were it came from International Harvester. From rivalries to reapers, the start was strong. But the real story is what came next. Don't miss it. Like the video, subscribe now, and follow the rest of International Harvester's journey. Chapter 4: War, Diversification, and Growing Pains. Success on the field gave International Harvester a reputation few could rival, but it was war that gave it purpose beyond agriculture. As the company entered the 1940s, the world was no longer just looking for machines to plant and harvest. It needed trucks that could move troops, half-tracks that could climb battlefields, and bulldozers that could shape roads in enemy territory. IH didn't hesitate. It answered the call, and in doing so, became something far more than a farm equipment manufacturer. The company's involvement in World War I had already proven its potential, but it was during World War II that International Harvester went all in. Its factories shifted gears and began producing a range of vehicles for the U.S. military. Trucks rolled off assembly lines by the thousands. Rugged, no-nonsense machines like the M5H6 and the M14, built to haul men, fuel, and supplies across everything from North African deserts to Pacific jungle trails. IH also provided components for armored half-tracks, field artillery transporters, and other mission-critical equipment that required strength, reliability, and quick delivery under pressure. When the fighting stopped, International Harvester didn't downshift, it repurposed. The same heavy-duty know-how it used for wartime production was now pointed at America's booming construction needs. Bulldozers, once built for clearing battlefields, were reborn as the TD series crawlers, with wide steel tracks and diesel engines that could reshape roads, level land, and cut into terrain that horses and hand tools had once feared. These were followed by the Payline series, a full suite of industrial machines including backhoes, loaders, and graders. The payloader, in particular, became a staple on construction sites, known for its durability and its ability to move heavy earth without slowing down. But the company didn't stop at job sites. It saw opportunity in the American home too. As suburbs spread and consumer demand soared in the post-war years, International Harvester entered the household appliance market. Milk coolers, refrigerators, and kitchen freezers began to carry the same logo that once marked tractors and tanks. Though short-lived, IH sold its refrigeration division by 1955. The foray into domestic appliances reflected a company still chasing growth at every turn. In the early 1960s, that pursuit extended into a new kind of machine, the riding mower. The Cub Cadet lawn tractor was introduced as a scaled-down workhorse for residential use. Built with the same mechanical DNA as its larger cousins, it featured gasoline engines measuring around 5,300 cubic centimeters, or about 332 cubic inches, offering homeowners the ability to manage acreage with a machine that felt professional but didn't overwhelm. On paper, the strategy looked brilliant. Military, construction, appliances, residential, and agriculture. Few companies had ever attempted such wide diversification, and even fewer succeeded. But behind the scenes, the cracks were forming. Each division had its own leadership, its own budget, its own ambitions. Coordinating them became a daily challenge. Engineers in one department didn't speak the language of another. Decisions stalled, projects overlapped, and in boardrooms across the company, executives struggled to balance growth with control. International Harvester had expanded faster than anyone else in its class. But now, the very size that once brought strength was starting to pull in every direction. Resources were stretched, communication was strained, and for the first time in decades, the company wasn't moving forward, it was drifting. The machines still worked, the factories still ran, but internally, International Harvester was heading toward resistance from within, and that tension would soon explode, not in the marketplace, but on the factory floor. Chapter 5. Strikes, Scandals, and Scout. For a company that had conquered so many markets with muscle and machinery, it wasn't steel or strategy that first slowed International Harvester. It was silence, the kind that falls over a factory floor when tools are dropped and boots are turned toward the gate. By the late 1940s, a new kind of pressure was rising inside the company, one that no crawler or combine could fix. It came from within, from workers who'd built the machines that built America and who now demanded something in return. The post-war boom had been good to International Harvester, but while profits climbed and new product lines expanded, those on the assembly lines saw something else: stagnation. Wages failed to keep pace with inflation. Workloads increased, while safety concerns were dismissed as secondary. Morale slipped, tension simmered, and by the early 1950s, that tension reached a boiling point. In the spring of 1952, the company faced its most defining labor conflict. Thousands of workers, represented by the United Auto Workers, walked off the job in what would become one of the most disruptive strikes in the company's history. For over 6 months, production across multiple plants ground to a halt. Millions of dollars were lost. Equipment deliveries stalled. Dealers were left waiting, and farmers found themselves caught in the middle of a battle that had nothing to do with crops or engines. International Harvester's leadership tried to keep operations moving. Replacement workers were brought in. Security was tightened, but the effort backfired. The strike-breaking attempts only deepened resentment. News coverage turned hostile. Public sentiment, once firmly in IH's corner, began to shift. The image of the reliable, unstoppable manufacturer gave way to something more brittle, an empire cracking under its own weight. When the strike finally ended, neither side claimed victory. The workers returned. The machines rolled out again, but trust had been lost, and with it, the stability IH once took for granted. Yet even as labor unrest rippled through the company, a bold new project was already in motion: one that had nothing to do with plows or combines. In 1961, International Harvester entered uncharted territory with a vehicle unlike anything it had produced before, the Scout. Compact, rugged, and built for versatility, the Scout was designed to compete with Jeep in the growing off-road market. It wasn't a tractor, it wasn't a truck, it was something in between, a recreational utility vehicle that could tow, climb, and carry gear across dirt trails and snowbanks with equal confidence. Its early success led to an updated version, the Scout II, which debuted in the 70s and quickly became a cult favorite, offered with multiple engine options, including gasoline power plants in the range of 4,900 cubic centimeters, or about 199 cubic inches. It delivered respectable torque with a boxy silhouette that became instantly recognizable. Over the years, more than 500,000 Scouts were sold. It was one of the few American vehicles that could compete head-to-head with Jeep on both style and substance. But even as the Scout found its footing in the market, the rest of the company struggled to keep pace. New divisions competed for resources. Communication broke down between departments. Internal politics slowed decision-making. The industrial sprawl that once symbolized power now looked like fragmentation. On the surface, IH was still launching products, still attending trade shows, still moving units. But beneath that surface, the cracks were widening. International Harvester had survived war, economic collapse, and competitive threats. But what lay ahead was something it hadn't prepared for: a prolonged period of internal misalignment, financial missteps, and strategic indecision. And it would begin not with a competitor's challenge, but with the weight of its own legacy pressing down from within. Chapter 6: Collapse of the Empire. While the Scout carved out its niche and workers returned to the line, the rest of International Harvester was running on borrowed momentum. By the start of the 1970s, the cracks that once ran beneath the surface were widening into full-blown fractures. The company was still massive, still producing trucks, tractors, loaders, mowers, engines, and parts, but the coordination that once held those divisions together had weakened. Product lines overlapped, strategies clashed, and slowly the edge that made IH an industry leader began to dull. Technology was advancing fast across the equipment world. Rivals like John Deere were rolling out tractors with integrated hydraulics, improved fuel delivery systems, and more intuitive controls. Others focused on emission standards, cab comfort, or international expansion. But IH found itself stuck between old models and expensive upgrades. Redesigning platforms across multiple divisions required deep capital, and for a company already stretched thin, that capital was harder to come by. Debt piled up. Operational costs surged. And with investor pressure mounting, International Harvester brought in a new CEO, Archie McCardle, a corporate veteran with a reputation for slashing costs and streamlining bloated operations. His plan was direct: layoffs, plant closures, and a tighter grip on production schedules. But what looked efficient on paper turned disastrous in practice. Morale collapsed, departments fought back, and communication, already strained, began to break down entirely. Then came the tipping point. In 1982, IH workers walked out again, this time in a strike that would last nearly 6 months and cost the company more than $600 million. Orders went unfilled, warehouses stalled, and the markets lost confidence. What began as a dispute over wages and job security quickly turned into a standoff that neither side could afford. When the strike finally ended, the damage was irreversible. International Harvester had bled cash, credibility, and leadership in a single blow. With little left to cut and no clear path forward, the company made a decision that once seemed unthinkable. In 1985, International Harvester sold off its agricultural division, the very business that had started it all. The buyer was Tenneco, a sprawling conglomerate that already owned the J.I. Case Company, another agricultural manufacturer with deep roots and steady footing. The sale wasn't just financial, it was symbolic. IH was no longer the master of its own destiny. Its iconic tractors, including the long-running Farmall line, were folded into a new identity: Case IH. Red paint stayed. The name was preserved, but the empire had split. And for those who had grown up with the Harvester badge, the transition felt less like a merger and more like a funeral. International Harvester, once the biggest name in farm machinery, was now just a memory on half the machines it had built. And though its name would carry on in other industries, its dominance in agriculture, the legacy that began with a mechanical reaper in a Virginia field, was over. Chapter 7: Navistar and the Diesel Legacy. When the agricultural division was sold and the Farmall name handed over to Case, International Harvester could have faded into history. But instead of disappearing, the company transformed. What emerged in the aftermath of the 1985 split was a new entity, Navistar International Corporation. With tractors off the books and the iconic red paint now under new ownership, the company shifted its weight entirely toward the commercial sector, medium and heavy-duty trucks, diesel engines, military vehicles, and large-scale transportation infrastructure. The iron stayed, but the field was gone. At the center of this new chapter was one machine, the DT466 diesel engine, first introduced during the IH era and carried forward under Navistar. This engine quickly gained a reputation as one of the most reliable power plants ever put to work in North American trucks. With a displacement of 7.6 liters, or approximately 464 cubic inches, it delivered a balance of torque, efficiency, and durability that made it the go-to choice for school buses, delivery vehicles, and vocational trucks from coast to coast. Unlike other diesels of the era, the DT466 was built with a wet sleeve design, allowing for easier overhauls and longer life cycles, a feature that made it especially popular among fleet operators and independent repair shops alike. Navistar doubled down on that reputation. The company leaned hard into the medium and heavy-duty truck market, producing well-known models under the international brands such as the 4900 series, ProStar, and Workstar lines. School districts across the United States adopted buses built on Navistar chassis. Defense contracts continued to roll in as the company supplied rugged vehicles capable of handling off-road missions, troop transport, and logistics support. For a time, it seemed the post-Harvester legacy had found solid footing, not on farms, but on highways and through supply chains. Navistar's operations grew steadily, but not without friction. While the DT series engines earned praise, other product lines struggled to match that reputation. Engineering teams were often pushed to meet tight deadlines, as new emissions rules were introduced with increasing frequency. Internal resources were stretched thin, and innovation sometimes came at the cost of quality control. By the mid-1990s, whispers had already begun about reliability concerns in newer platforms. The company poured resources into maintaining its military and school bus contracts, even as development in civilian transport began to lag behind more agile competitors. Customers who had once counted on international trucks for decades began exploring alternatives as newer offerings from other manufacturers promised lower downtime and better efficiency. Meanwhile, the weight of maintaining older engine platforms while developing new ones strained Navistar's budget. The company was still moving, still building, but the pace was slower and the confidence weaker. But the 1990s brought more than just demand. It brought scrutiny. New environmental regulations were rolled out with increasing speed and complexity, particularly around diesel emissions. The Environmental Protection Agency imposed strict standards on nitrogen oxide output, forcing diesel manufacturers to invest heavily in cleaner technologies. Navistar responded by doubling down on its proprietary exhaust gas recirculation system, commonly known as EGR. On paper, EGR looked like a promising solution. By recirculating a portion of an engine's exhaust back into the combustion chamber, temperatures could be lowered and emissions reduced without the need for exhaust treatment fluids. But in the real world, the system quickly proved unreliable. Engines ran hotter, maintenance issues spiked, and fuel efficiency plummeted. Between the years 2012 and 2015, Navistar was hit with a wave of customer complaints, warranty claims, and lawsuits that would gut the company's credibility. The damage was immediate and severe. Thousands of trucks were recalled. Class action lawsuits accused the company of knowingly selling engines that failed to meet basic reliability standards. Fleets that had once trusted Navistar walked away in droves, shifting to competitors like Freightliner and Kenworth. At the core of the backlash was a single question: why had Navistar bet everything on a system that didn't work? The company had no good answer. Leadership changes followed, revenues fell, and the brand, once respected for its dependability, was now known for its silence and settlements. The EGR disaster didn't just shake Navistar's bottom line, it shattered the trust that had taken decades to build. It was a corporate wound, deep and public, with scars that would take years to heal. Yet through all of it, the machines kept rolling. DT series engines continued to power fleets across the country. Old international school buses, many still running on original blocks, proved just how resilient IH's engineering roots had been. But the brand that had once driven forward with confidence was now limping, struggling to keep pace in an industry it used to lead. Navistar hadn't fallen completely, but it had lost something vital, and the only way forward would be through reinvention once again, this time with help from beyond its own walls. Chapter 8. Rebirth. Under Volkswagen's Traton. Wounded but still standing, Navistar limped into the late 2010s looking for more than just stability. It needed reinvention. After years of missteps, mechanical failures, and fading customer trust, the company began seeking partners who could offer more than capital. It needed technology, infrastructure, and vision. And in the modern world of global transport and emissions compliance, those things weren't built overnight. They had to be borrowed, traded, or acquired. That's when Europe came knocking. Volkswagen's Traton Group, already a dominant player in global trucking through brands like MAN and Scania, had been eyeing a North American expansion. The U.S. market was the last major territory it hadn't fully entered. Navistar, though bruised, still had an extensive dealer network, deep roots in logistics and defense, and a long-standing familiarity with fleet buyers across the country. In other words, everything Traton needed if it could be salvaged. By 2021, the deal was finalized. Traton acquired Navistar International in full, absorbing the company and folding its operations into a larger global framework. For some, it looked like the final step in a long decline. But for those who remembered where International Harvester had come from, it felt like something else. A rebirth, not as a standalone empire, but as part of a broader, smarter machine. The changes came quietly at first. Joint development programs were launched. Navistar began gaining access to advanced European diesel platforms, emission systems, and driver assist technologies that had been standard overseas but were still emerging in North America. In return, Traton gained a foothold in the American heavy-duty sector, an entry point into a market long dominated by Freightliner, PACCAR, and legacy IH loyalists, still driving old Workstar and Transtar rigs. But beneath the strategy, something deeper was happening. The DNA of International Harvester, scattered across decades of tractors, trucks, and diesel engines, was now being threaded into a global system. Engines like the DT466, with displacements of 7.6 liters, or around 464 cubic inches, still ran strong in fleets from Ohio to Oregon. Case IH tractors, born from the 1980s merger with J.I. Case, continued to work soil with mechanical layouts that owed everything to IH's original engineering blueprints. Even lawn tractors bearing the Cub Cadet name still carried mechanical designs rooted in the company's 1960s residential push. What disappeared was only the name. What remained was the function, the form, and the purpose. Navistar, for all its struggles, became a vessel for something bigger than itself. It carried forward the grit and utility that once made IH unstoppable. Fleets that swore off the brand during the emissions crisis gradually returned to give it another shot. Traton's investment didn't just bring parts and platforms. It brought stability. Engineers who once fought to keep outdated systems afloat now had new tools, new standards, and a renewed sense of direction. For the first time in decades, innovation was back on the table. Prototypes rolled through test tracks with features that once seemed out of reach: active safety, hybrid drivetrains, predictive maintenance. The conversation had shifted from survival to leadership, and with that shift came something even more important: trust. In modern factories and high-tech offices, that purpose now wears a different badge. Traton logos decorate PowerPoint decks. MAN and Scania platforms inform new drivetrain layouts. But at the core of it all, a century-old belief still guides the work: that machines should last, that power should be earned, and that the people behind the wheel matter as much as the machines they operate. International Harvester didn't just build machines. It built America's backbone. From the cornfields of the Midwest to the convoy routes of World War II, from the farmel pulling seed drills to the scout climbing unpaved hills, IH left a mark deeper than any logo. It simply kept going. So today, whether it's a red Case IH plowing under morning frost or a diesel truck hauling freight down Interstate 80 with a Navistar badge under a Traton-owned cab, the legacy of International Harvester still lives. From reapers to diesel rigs, International Harvester shaped the backbone of American industry, then vanished in plain sight. Got memories of an IH machine that never quit? Share them below, hit like, and subscribe for more stories built to last.